Salutations all. Welcome back to another adventure. Thank you for stopping in. I do apologize for the delays. Dad bod training has really been taking up a lot of my schedule. And you know what they say, if you want the results, you got to put in the work. So that's what I've been doing. But enough of that. Today, we're going to talk about taking care of our tools. What do I mean by our tools? Well, for us in the kitchen, the number one tool is going to be our knives. Before we get into that, let's get into this. Something you may not know about me. I grew up a fight fan. A fan of the pugilist, the fisticuffs, masters of the squared circle, boxing. I practically grew up in a gym. There are so many fighters out there. When their names are mentioned, you can immediately see their faces. You may even be able to bring up highlights and reminisce on their greatness. The Alis, the Tysons, Foremans, Hagglers, the De La Hoyas, the Mayweathers for you younger fans out there. But there are so many names that have been lost to history, so many great champions and fighters out there. This one in particular really should be glorified in the names of the greats. He was known by many names in the ring. The Boston Bone Crusher, the Boston Terror, or the Boston Tar Baby. Standing at 6 feet and a half inches, weighing in at 185 pounds, Samuel Edgar Langford. This is him. Now, Mr. Langford was born in 1883, baby. Began boxing as a young man and found that he was really good at it. Could make quite a bit of money doing it, and that's what he did for the majority of his life. This man has a record of 211 wins, 126 by way of knockout, 43 losses and 52 draws. This man was feared by champions, including Dempsey, including Jack Johnson, who once became the general champion, refused to fight Mr. Langford because he didn't want that smoke and knew what was going to happen. Samuel E. Langford, unfortunately, because of the color barriers and the time that he lived in, could not do much else and fought well past his prime, losing his vision and ultimately passing away in the poverty that he started from. But nonetheless, this man, legend of the sport. Please check him out, Samuel Edgar Langford. In the past, you've heard me talk about how all knives are not created equal, right? Now, it doesn't necessarily play into you get what you pay for, but in most cases, you get what you pay for. Alright? So, the other thing that makes knives different are their uses, right? So you have knives like this, your serrated knives, right? With the serrations, typically used for bread, or, even sawing through tougher objects, can be used for meat as well, okay? We've got our slicing and our carving knives here. It's what you see at a lot of your buffet lines. If there's a carving station, you'll typically have one of those. That's what these little grooves are for here, to help to let the objects that you're slicing fall away. You've got a standard chef knife here, right? Standard chef knife. This adorable little cheese cleaver. Come on. Then you've got the cleaver's big brother. Alright? And what makes them all different? Well, as you know, knife blades are typically not flat. Some are flatter than others all the way across the board, but most of them have a bevel. So they come to a point, kind of like this, right? And so, depending on the bevel of the blade, is going to change how you're able to sharpen that blade. So you might have a single beveled blade, which this one actually is. I don't know if I'll be able to show you guys. So on this side, you can see that there's a little lip there. But on this side, it is completely flat. Now, typically in a larger blade, you'll see that a lot in your sushi knives, right? The sushi chefs typically have a single beveled blade. The way that they are using them, the way that they are slicing, they go in one direction, right? Long, smooth strokes, pause. But the single bevel. And so when you sharpen those knives, they are sharpened very differently than I'm going to show you in some of these techniques. Here you can really see that lip there on the big cleaver. You can see that lip right there. versus my carving knives, my slicing knives. They're pretty flat, right? What does all that mean? Well, typically with a carving knife, you want it to be very, very sharp, razor sharp. Now, you think about a razor, it's a pretty flat edge, right? A pretty flat-ended blade. So, though a razor is very sharp, they tend to get dull a lot quicker, right? Versus a cleaver, which is generally used for heavy-duty things, though in some cultures they just use it for absolutely everything. And a cleaver can be sharpened to the point that you can shave with it. But because it's used for the heavy work, that larger bevel helps that blade keep an edge longer. Now, will it be as sharp as this knife? No, not necessarily. But it'll stay sharp longer. So the thicker the bevel, typically the sharper the blade will stay for longer. Obviously, depending on what kind of metal it's made out of, its craftsmanship, so on and so forth. So we're going to talk about how we take care of our knives on a manual level. There are plenty of machines and gadgets out there that you can get that will make life easy for you. But I'm an old school guy. I find some peace in sharpening my knives at home and trying to get them to that razor's edge, shaving the hairs off of your arm, or doing the paper test, which we might do or not do. We'll see. So let's talk about some different ways to do that. Now, for your serrated blades, you can use the machines. They do make machines that will sharpen these for you. I'm sure you can find them at any of your local stores, even online, of course, right? But to do these blades by hand, you're going to actually need a file, a small file, to get into those ridges there, all right? But for the rest of the blades, let's look at what I've got here. Now, he said, it's not the size of the stone, it's how you use it. I guess that's fair. And when I started out, I had a small stone. And it got the job done, right? It served its purpose. But as I grew and became more passionate, I got this big black one. I got this big one. Now, these two things, they're the same. Just the size is different. That's it, right? I'll explain to you why I went up to that. Because now, I've gone back to these. These are a little bit different than the other two, and let me explain. With most of your sharpening stones, even with the tri-stones, which is what the other two are, you can go one of two ways. You can use a lubricant, typically a mineral oil, right? Please, if you're going to use the oils, don't do olive oil, vegetable oil, any of those cooking oils, because these stones are very porous, and they will absorb that oil, and then they will become rancid, which is gross. Or you can go the water route. So stones like these, you would be able to take them, you'll soak them in water for about 15 to 30 minutes prior to you using them, and then they will basically lubricate themselves while you're sharpening. You want that lubrication, right? You don't want to take a dry stone and just start rubbing the knife away. It's just really going to do a lot of damage to your blade. But let's do a little bit of breakdown here. Why are these special? What makes all of these setups special? Well, first, let me show you. So you'll notice the numbers there, right? And this is going to talk about the grit. That's what these are. That's what these represent. So think about sandpaper, right? Sandpaper has different roughness or different fineness depending on what you want to do or what you're trying to accomplish. The same thing with these stones. So if I were to put them in order, proper order there, if I had a blade that was completely dull, just really kind of like my little miniature cutie pie cheese blade there, I would want to start with the 400, right, the roughest, and I want to work my way down. So I would start here, try to really get an edge put on it, and then slowly work my way down until I got here on the finest, which is basically just to really smooth it out and really finish off a razor's edge. Okay. Now with my tri-stones, and we'll do the small one, easier to hold, they aren't quite as refined as those. All right. Now you can get them, and they'll tell you, what the grit is on those. But for the most part, when you get these, it's going to say coarse, medium, and fine. Coarse, medium, and fine. All right. And that's the same on the large one as well. Like I said, it is just a longer version. Now, the reason that I got the longer version is because I don't like having to work my knife back and forth for too long. I want to be able to give it nice, smooth strokes, and I will show you exactly what I mean. Let's talk about sharpening these knives. So, depending upon what type of blade you have, it's going to affect the angle that you use on the stone. The best thing to do, especially when you start spending money on some really good knives, especially the big names, right? The Wusthoffs, the Shuns, the So-Ons, right? Go on their website. Most of the time, the manufacturer of the blade will tell you the angle of which to sharpen your knife. When you buy stones like this, the other stones that I showed you, sometimes they come with little helpers. This is one. This one here, you would literally slide the blade in, and it sets an angle for you. You see that? So it sets the angle for you. I'll show you from that in. Sets the blade angle for you to work up and down. And at that point, you just hold it there, and you slide the knife down. One of my other ones came with a small wedge, so do the same exact purpose, just a wedge. You can do with stack some quarters, like 2 quarters. But again, it's going to depend on the knife. So let's start with my cleaver, which has that really well-defined lip there. Really well-defined. Kind of helps you set the angle all on its own. So if we went from a 90, 45, 35, 25 flat, I can take this cleaver, rock it right up onto that lip, right there where the bevel starts, and then go a little higher. So what I'm wanting is for the blade to be flat-ish at an angle there, so that when I am pushing it across, I am sharpening it, I am rubbing it away, we're using that friction to help sharpen the knife. Now, we would want to lubricate this first, so a few drops of oil. Remember not to use your olive oil, peanut oil, right? Stick to the mineral oils or your honing oils. So just to show you, what you would want to do is, starting at the far end, once you've got your lubrication down the stone, you'd start here at the butt of the knife, the butt of the blade, and as you're coming down pushing, you're kind of swiping there, right? So I'm going to push and swipe. I want to get the whole blade, which is why I said I like to use the larger one versus the smaller one, which though you can still do that, sometimes on larger blades you find yourself having to work section by section, which is also fine as well, because you can still get an entire swipe on there as well. So let me show you that again. So I put this down flat, right to the bevel, and just above. So if we were kind of using this thing, you can see as well, that angle would be about the same, right? So 2 quarters, use the wedges if you buy a stone right there. Also check the manufacturer's recommendation. So again, went to the bevel on the cleaver, and just above it, with a little bit of force. You're not really shoving that blade down in there extremely hard, but you do want to apply some pressure. And as you go from coarse to medium, you're going to release a little bit of that pressure, get a little bit lighter, and then on fine, you're going to kind of let the blade do its own thing while you're just keeping control of the blade. Now, with my flatter knives, like with my little vegetable knife here, obviously it's going to be a flatter blade. The bevel is not as deep as on the cleaver, but my angle will roughly be the same. So if we're using our little guide there, as you can see, the amount of space, so 90, boom. Same thing. So I would put my blade flat, turn it just till that blade begins to bite into the stone a little bit, and with some force and one sweep all the way across the tip. And then you would go back. Push and slide. Push and slide. Very, very simple. And as you start to get an edge on that blade, you'll actually be able to feel it. You can run your fingers across the top, and you'll be able to feel that blade becoming sharp as you work your way around. So let's talk about a few taking care of our tools tips. So some things to know before going into working with stones. If you start off using a stone and you are using oil, stick with oil. If you're going to use water, stick with water. Because again, like I said, they are porous. So some of that moisture stays within the stone. So if you're an oil guy and all of a sudden somebody's like, oh, I'm going to wash your stone, it will get disgustingly gunky and almost become unusable. I'm not really sure how to repair it at that point. Also, something that will happen over time your stones will start to dip a little bit. Typically in the middle, they'll start to dip. Don't fret. Easy fix. Find a flat surface, you put down some sandpaper, take your stone, and go to town. Well, you know what I mean. You go to work until you can get that stone back to as level as possible again. Another thing you want to do is to make sure that you are cleaning your stone on a regular basis after use, right? Because basically what happens is as you are sharpening, bits of the stone, bits of the knives, little flecks are getting into the stone. And if you don't take care of them and you don't clean them regularly, they end up like this. Very filled, very smooth, very not okay. You can see what color that stone is supposed to be, but it's got so much buildup. It was not taken care of. It just kind of sits around the house due to nostalgia, but sharpening your pin. Doing a good job. Good job. Oh, look at that. That's a good pin, buddy. Say hi, Mommy. So let me show you how you can clean your stone. Very, very simple, okay? So let's talk about that. Couple little tricks I'm going to show you. Now, one way to go about it that I used to do until I learned a new hack was just take a little bit of your oil. You take something coarse, nice scouring pad, some steel wool, something like that. And you work circles and it'll loosen up that debris, and then you can wipe it down with a napkin, paper towel, whatever you got on hand. Bunch of kitchen towels if you're a greasy line cook that's been stowing them away from work for years. But I also found an easy fix. The WD-40. Let me show you. Put a little WD-40 here. Or not. Get our little scrubber. Give it a few scrubs. Give it a wipe. And you start removing all of that buildup. Very, very simple. Very, very easy, right? Alright, one more thing. So one last thing I want to talk about. You know, in movies, you always see the chef with that rod thing, and they're just all up and down, and it looks so cool. And you're thinking, well, that must be how they sharpen their knives. It's not. It looks really good on TV, but that's not how we sharpen our knives. This is how we sharpen our knives. Or if you work in a really grimy kitchen, sometimes they take them outside and rub them on the curb like they're in prison. But anyway, so this is a form of sharpening stone, but it's really a honing rod. So they come circular, or you see this one's a little more flat, right? And this does have some grit on it. It has some texture, kind of like my stones. But it is used for a slightly different purpose. When we're using our knives, right-handed or left-handed, believe it or not, you end up turning that blade a little bit as you're slicing. And so remember I said the blades kind of come to a point, right? So as you're using it, depending on which hand you're using, that blade begins to lean in one direction or the other. So it's not that it's not necessarily sharp, it's just kind of getting worn. For my ice skaters out there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So that's exactly what these are for. Now, proper, same thing as on the stone. You'll angle that blade in, bring all the way down. Angle it in, all the way down. So yes, it does look cool, but you don't have to do it 50,000 times. That's TV. You know, 5 good strokes on each side will put that blade right back where it's supposed to be, and you're back in business with a good, sharp blade. I mean, that's pretty much the gist of it. That's how easy it is to take care of your knives. Even like a super cheap knockoff knife, you want to take care of it. Because if you don't take care of it, it will take care of you. I hope this has been helpful. Thank you guys for stopping by for another adventure. Come back and see us. We are putting out some more content, I promise.